I would like to share a reading with you, Merciless Indian Savages by the Aspen Center. I pulled this off of the Center for Native American Youth. I certainly offer that up as a page that you guys might want to check out at some point in time. That's got a lot of good information on some of the things we're talking about today. Some reflections as families come together during the long weekend in what is recognized as a federal holiday, the 4th of July. The Declaration of Independence was adopted on the 4th of July in 1776. We as Americans are all too familiar with the statement from the Declaration which states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Yet lines below refer to Native Americans, who we all know are the first inhabitants and stewards of the land, as merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages. Oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, whose rule for us? Yeah, I was right. Destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions is the quote. It is clear that all men are created equal does not include the Native American, who are clearly perceived as subhuman to the United States of America's founding fathers. The roots of injustice in the United States of America is written for the entire world to read. Merciless Indian savages. The reality is that the United States exists because the land was colonized by means of degrading, looting, enslaving, and committing mass cultural genocide of indigenous peoples. In fact, with the emergence of the United States of America, the flag we salute today was viewed by many as conflict, death, and destruction to the sacred and cultural American Indian way of life. Native populations decreased, as did traditional homelands and cultural ceremonies. Many battles and forcible removals of Indian people from their traditional land is what this nation was founded on. From Battle of Wounded Knee, Battle of Steptoe, Battle of the Little Bighorn, the Indian Removal Act, the Trail of Tears, to name only a few. Ironically, according to the Smithsonian Museum of American Indian, federal agents allowed Indians who lived on reservations to conduct ceremonies on the 4th of July as a way to have Indians learn about patriotism and celebrate the United States. As a result, a large number of tribal powwows and cultural celebrations occurred during this time today. In fact, many tribal communities use this time to celebrate and honor American Indian warriors. This is seen during flag songs, veteran songs, and victory songs we listen and dance to during grand entry at powwows. This is a reminder that Native Americans have served the military and armed forces at the highest rate of any ethnic group, including in world wars when they were not granted or recognized to be American citizens. My call to action is simple. As you light your fireworks and celebrate the federal holiday, let us remember the indigenous people of this land who bore the wrath of what this federal holiday represents. Let us honor the merciless Indian savage.
In our fellowship, we share so many things: time, efforts, talents, spirit, and money. We share with this fellowship and for the needs of the fellowship, but we also share with our greater community beyond these walls. You may contribute to the fellowship or to our social action offering recipient for July, Gaia House Interfaith Center. There is more information about them in your order of service, and we will hear more about them on July 19th. Checks should be made payable to CUF, and you can also donate online via PayPal. The link is in the chat and in your order of service. Use the check memo area or the note area in PayPal if you wish to specify a contribution to Gaia House Interfaith Center. Also remember that your spare change makes a difference. All the coins collected during the offering are sent to the UUA Annual Program Fund, which provides important resources to UU congregations, including CUF. Please join me in our unison offering reading. The words are in your order of service and on the screen. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. Your contributions in all forms are gratefully received. And now we'll enjoy a video of the Lakota prayer song by... It's a video of the Lakota prayer song by Santee Witt.
In Lakota tradition, when prayer songs are being played and sung, it's traditional to rise in honor of that song. So we ask if you are willing and able to do so when Mr. Bill gets it pulled up and it's ready to play. I'll give a little more insight on this particular video too, which is two modern Lakota youth sitting in the shade outside of their trailer. They've written this song and they're praying it and they're performing it and sending it out in ceremony via YouTube. This is how people do Indigenous-American life.
So much for AI. Activity didn't work, did it?
The translation to that was, Grandfather, Waka Tunkashila, hear our humble prayer. Hihani washte mitaku yapi. Wilhelmina chante Mary Moon Terrell imachi yapikshto. Idaho imataha lahano Caldwell watie. Unawaye king Sylvia Gorel Marman ichiyapi na ate Joaquin Kent Marman ichiyapik shto. Unshi Thelma Nielsen na Shirley Vosu na Beverly Running Bear, Iwichiapi. Lala George Gorell na Lauren Marmon, Iwichakiapi. Chante Washtea Nape Chiuzape, Mitakuye Oyasin. Good morning, my relatives. My name is Wilhelmina Chante Maramoon Terrell. I was born in Caldwell, Idaho. My parents are Sylvia and Kent Marmon. My grandmothers are Thelma Nielsen Gorell and Shirley Vosu Marmon and Beverly Running Bear. My grandfathers are George Gorell and Lauren Marmon. I greet you all with an open heart. Some of you may recognize this introduction. It's the same one I gave when I stood here just about 2 years ago. It's a traditional Lakota way of telling who we are, where we came from, and who we come from. I spoke it when I gave my previous talk on going beyond the land acknowledgement. Since then, I have heard the same boring land acknowledgement recited week after week, which is honestly still lacking, something I've mentioned to a few members about expanding upon on a few occasions. So instead of continuing to repeat myself and feel less than heard, I am going to honor the words of my Oglala Lakota relative, Layli Long Soldier. I will read one excerpt from her series of whereas statements and one piece called 38, which received a Griffin Poetry Prize. You might want to take notes so you remember all the things that you'll need to research when you get home. Starting with Whereas, a beautiful poetry book by Layli Long Soldier. It in itself is a master course on Indigenous history. Whereas, the word whereas, means it being the case that, or considering that, or while on the contrary, is a qualifying or introductory statement, a conjunction, a connector. Whereas sets the table, the cloth, the salt shakers and plates. Whereas calls me to the table. Whereas precedes and invites. I have come now. I am seated across from a whereas smile. Under pressure of formalities, I fidget, I shake my legs. I'm not one for these smiles. Whereas I have spent my life in unholding. What do you mean by unholding? Whereas asks. And since whereas rarely asks, I am moved to respond. Whereas I have learned to exist, and exist without your formality, salt shakers, plates, cloths, without the slightest conjunctions to connect me, without an exchange of questions, without the courtesy of answers. It is mine, this unholding, so that with or without the setup, I can see the dish being served. Whereas, let us bow our heads in prayer now, just enough to eat. "38. Here, the sentence will be respected. I will compose each sentence with care by minding what the rules of writing dictate. For example, all sentences will begin with capital letters. Likewise, the history of the sentence will be honored by ending each one with appropriate punctuation, such as a period or question mark, thus bringing the idea to momentary completion. You may like to know I do not consider this a creative piece. I do not regard this as a poem of great imagination or a work of fiction. Also, historical events will not be dramatized for an interesting read. Therefore, I will feel most responsible to the orderly sentence, conveyor of thought. That said, I will begin. You may or may not have heard of the Dakota 38. If this is the first time you've heard of it, you might wonder, what is the Dakota 38? The Dakota 38 refers to 38 Dakota men who were executed by hanging under orders from President Abraham Lincoln. To date, this is the largest legal mass execution in U.S. history. The hanging took place on December 26, 1862, the day after Christmas. This was the same week that President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. In the preceding sentence, I italicized same week for emphasis. There was a movie titled Lincoln about the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. The signing of the Emancipation Proclamation was included in the film Lincoln. The hanging of the Dakota 38 was not. In any case, you might be asking, why were 38 Dakota men hung? As a side note, the past tense of hang is hung, but when referring to the capital punishment of hanging, the correct past tense is hanged. So it's possible that you're asking, why were 38 Dakota men hanged? They were hanged for the Sioux Uprising. I want to tell you about the Sioux Uprising, but I don't know where to begin. I may jump around, and details will not unfold in chronological order. Keep in mind, I am not a historian. So I will recount facts as best as I can, given limited resources and understanding. Before Minnesota was a state, the Minnesota region, generally speaking, was the traditional homeland for Dakota, Anishinaabe, and Ho-Chunk peoples. During the 1800s, when the U.S. expanded territory, they purchased land from the Dakota people as well as the other tribes. But another way to understand that sort of purchase is Dakota leaders ceded land to the U.S. government in exchange for money or goods, but most importantly, the safety of their people. Some say that Dakota leaders did not understand the terms they were entering, or they never would have agreed. Even others call the entire negotiation trickery. But to make whatever it was official and binding, the U.S. government drew up an initial treaty. This treaty was later replaced by another, more convenient treaty, and then another. I've had difficulty unraveling the terms of these treaties, given the legal speak and congressional language. As treaties were abrogated, broken, and new treaties were drafted one after another, the new treaties often referenced old defunct treaties, and it is a muddy switchback trail to follow. Although I often feel lost on this trail, I know I am not alone. However, as best as I can put the facts together, in 1851, Dakota Territory was contained to a 12-mile by 150-mile long strip along the Minnesota River. But just 7 years later, in 1858, the northern portion was ceded, taken, and the southern portion was conveniently allotted, which means sold to white people, which reduced Dakota land to a stark 10-mile tract. These amended and broken treaties are often referred to as the Minnesota Treaties. The word Minnesota comes from Mini, which means water, and Sota, which means turbid. Synonyms for turbid include muddy, unclear, cloudy, confused, smoky. Everything is in the language we use. For example, a treaty is essentially a contract between two sovereign nations. The U.S. treaties with the Dakota Nation were legal contracts that promised money. It could be said this money was payment for the land that Dakota ceded, for living within assigned boundaries, a reservation, and for relinquishing rights to their vast hunting territory, which in turn made Dakota people dependent on other means to survive, money. The previous sentence is circular, akin to so many aspects of history. As you may have guessed by now, the money promised in the turbid treaties did not make it into the hands of the Dakota people. In addition, local government traders would not offer credit to Indians to purchase food or goods. Without money, store credit, or rights to hunt beyond their 10-mile tract of land, Dakota people began to starve. The Dakota people were starving. The Dakota people starved. In the preceding sentence, the word starved does not need italics for emphasis. One should read the Dakota people starved as a straightforward and plainly stated fact. As a result, and without other options but continuing to starve, Dakota people retaliated. Dakota warriors organized, struck out, and killed settlers and traders. This revolt is called the Sioux Uprising. Eventually, the U.S. cavalry came to Minnesota to confront the uprising. More than 1,000 Dakota people were sent to prison. As already mentioned, 38 Dakota men were subsequently hanged. After the hanging, those 1,000 Dakota prisoners were released. However, as further consequence, what remained of Dakota territory in Minnesota was dissolved, stolen. The Dakota people had no land to return to. This means they were exiled. Homeless, the Dakota people of Minnesota were relocated, forced, onto reservations in South Dakota and Nebraska. Now, every year, a group called the Dakota 38+2 Riders conduct a memorial horse ride from Lower Brule, South Dakota, to Mankato, Minnesota. The memorial riders travel 325 miles on horseback for 18 days, sometimes through sub-zero blizzards. They conclude their journey on December 26th, the day of the hanging. Memorials help focus our memory on particular people or events. Often memorials come in the form of plaques, statues, or gravestones. The memorial for the Dakota 38 is not an object inscribed with words, but an act. Yet I started this piece because I was interested in writing about grasses. So there is one other event to include, although it is not in chronological order, and we must backtrack a little. When the Dakota people were starving, as you may remember, government traders would not extend store credit to Indians. One trader named Andrew Merrick is famous for his refusal to provide credit to Dakota people by saying, "If they are hungry, let them eat grass." There are variations of Merrick's words, but they are all something to that effect. When settlers and traders were killed during the Sioux Uprising, one of the first to be executed by the Dakota was Andrew Merrick. When Merrick's body was found, his mouth was stuffed with grass. I am inclined to call this act by the Dakota warriors a poem. There's irony in their poem. There was no text. Real poems do not really require words. I have italicized the previous sentence to indicate inner dialogue, a revealing moment. But on second thought, the words "let them eat grass" click the gears of the poem into place. So we could also say language and word choice are crucial to the poem's work. Things are circling back again. Sometimes when a circle, if I wish to exit, I must leap and let the body swing from the platform out to the grasses.
Lovely.
Honest history is not easy, especially coming from our position as the product of the settlers that occupied the land we are now standing on. From the previous reading that is shared, I have the question when Wilhelmina first read that is, I wonder how many had ever heard of that. I know my students didn't in my classrooms teaching in South Dakota on the Pine Ridge and Sichangri reservations. Mind-blowing for me. This is not a journey to be taken lightly and should, be gut-wrenchingly painful to read about and try to process, much less try to find ways to act to dismantle the actions of our settler ancestors, an act that must be done, or messages like this one become nothing more than performative wringing of our hands and the continued tacit approval of past atrocities. This is a hard discussion for me, having taught among the Lakota people, my people, the Oyate, literally the people. Giving back to them what had been taken to them just from knowledge standpoint. My Lakota students didn't know about the Dakota 38 and so many of the other things that were done, except for those ones that I know that actually took the ride, raised their horses, covered them in paint, and took the ride. Now remember, it's December, the end of December. It's frickin' cold up there. This is not an easy ride. But every Lakota youth that takes that ride, head high, riding with their tushunka, their horse, to honor this act. There's so much more in this honest history component, and it's taken us a long time to try and distill this down to something that we can present in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 6 hours, 3 days. I mean, it's big, and there's more to be done. I've been in a lot of UU congregations that try to do this work, one in Rapid City, South Dakota. We got together, we read the books, we had the discussion, we were outraged, and still nothing changed, nothing happened. So for me, it's that case that we must find a way to move beyond book discussions and engagement in committee work to address issues that must move beyond our hearts or beyond our heads, which is certainly the place to start. If you don't know, you can't do better. It's got to flow to our hearts and let our hearts break open and flow forward with the compassion. All of these other pieces lead with love. But then take that and drive our hands, our feet, our mouths into action, into motions to do the things that our values say we stand for. Honest history is hard. Exploring the willingness of what one people are willing to do to another, the most horrible acts that the manifest destiny-driven Europeans did to the original inhabitants of this continent is beyond, just beyond. I had no other words I could put in there. In the congregations that I've been involved in, keep in mind I've been a Unitarian Universalist for 35 years in lots of different states and places and areas. There is this tendency to hide within the bounds of our bastions of liberal thinking. And not move beyond our doors to engage in a community that needs us. We need that community to do the work within ourselves, to decolonize our way of thinking, our way of being, our way of doing or not doing. And as I said before, the head part is important, but it can't be the end point. Decolonization involves tearing down the settlers' constructs. This goes well beyond 250 years honored, merciless and doing savages, of the encroachment driven by imperial domination that is being lifted up this weekend. Got a real buzzkill in my classroom during the Pledge of Allegiance, too. It's got to be beyond 1619, where yet another group of individuals are brought to these shores in the first enslavements. It's got to be beyond 1492, where the first acts of the Europeans were to enslave and kill and steal from the Town of Peoples. But this subject is vastly larger than some Sunday service could possibly ever encompass. It's too big, but it's got to be done. This is where it comes back to you guys. We've spent years and years and years working on this. I don't know where any of you guys are at in any of this discussion. I was super excited about the honest history component, but also terrified to present this information. How is the congregation going to receive this? And do I care? I do. But it's hard. Honest history. Ooh, it's a hard month. So we brought some more terms up with this. There's lots of information on doing this work. If you do a search online for decolonization, and I did that, and then moved on to decolonization toolkits, there's pages and pages of information that's been done. The beginning of this lifting has been done, this heavy lifting, to figure out what the heck is going on. But it requires you to step up and actually take the action to make it happen. What does that look like here in Illinois, where our settler ancestors already chased off, killed, or assimilated all of the tribal folks that are here? And then it leads me to the I wonder statements. I wonder how many of you had heard about the Dakota 38 plus 2. I wonder how many of you had heard of the Allegheny Confederation. 13 different tribal groups here in Illinois. Vast confederation of individuals and people. all the way from north to south, Great Lakes, all the way down to the meeting of the rivers. The Cahokians are involved in that, and a whole host. Will's got the list of all of the tribes that were there, and it's extensive. So again, from the standpoint of land acknowledgement, I don't know, we could stand here all day and try and do land acknowledgements. 25,000 years of occupation, caring for the land, doing those things. Two sources that I did pull, one of them called beautifultrouble.org, one of the toolkits on decolonization. These words are brought to you by a professor of rhetoric and argumentation at the University of Utah, Danielle Endres. And she says, colonization is a historical and ongoing form of territorial, economic, and mental conquest in which one group of indigenous people, the first inhabitants of the place, is subordinated and put in service to another group of people under the forces of imperialism. Decolonization is a set of ideas and lived experiences that challenge imperialism through forms of bottom-up disobedience to historical and ongoing colonization. Theories and manifestations of decolonization prioritize indigenous, non-Western forms of knowledge, spirituality, cultural practices, and sovereignty. Given the diversity of indigenous groups and colonized people around the world, decolonization frameworks and strategies of resistance vary greatly from place to place, depending on the specific historical relation between the imperial power and the colonized populations. Decolonization theory raises questions about whether or not it's possible to use the master's tools, quote unquote, including all the legal and theoretical concepts inherited from modernity, to dismantle the master's house and to construct something better. Right? No. So that's just the first part, and that's a hours-long master's class in decolonization and what that looks like. I just pulled the first excerpt. And the second one I have is from the community-based Global Learning Cooperative. Another toolbox. When we misunderstand words, we misunderstand each other. As with many terms hashtag tracked, commercialized, and weaponized, decolonization has suffered a distortion casually thrown around online, in the media, in academic discourse, and in social justice spaces without nuance. How many of you all know what, have heard the word decolonization? It means something for you. Yeah. This distortion causes people to either dismiss the term entirely or engage with it in a way that decenters the indigenous narrative that is so central to the movement. Eve Took, an Alaskan Aleut, I'm working on it, associate professor at the University of Ontario, and Kay Yang, professor at UC San Diego and provost at John Muir College, both speak of distilling decolonization's true meaning. In the work, Decolonization is not a metaphor. You wrote that down, right? No, okay. I have it for you. Tuck and Yang argue that the language of decolonization is often superficially adopted in moves of settler innocence, moves that perpetuate ideas that settlers have a reduced or no responsibility in colonizing indigenous lands and people. Well, I wasn't there. I didn't enslave people. No. Settler innocence. According to Tuck and Yang, a common move occurs when people rely too heavily on the notion of decolonizing your mind or thinking or knowledge. This can include efforts to read more Black, Brown, and Indigenous writers, for example. Decolonial curriculum and thinking can indeed be a substantive part of the movement. It's a powerful tool for deconstructing colonial influence on knowledge and education. However, They note that while this can feel radical and transformative, it is not the sole or final step of decolonization. I bolded this. It is not the sole or final step of decolonization. Here to here to here. We can't stop here. We cannot only dedicate ourselves to thinking about decolonization, we must act to decolonize. Additionally, efforts to indigenize, appropriating indigenous approaches to life or even falsely claiming indigenous identity, do not contribute to decolonization. We can't just Indian it up, but further colonize indigenous knowledge and identity. Decolonization calls for decentering the narrative by which settlers romanticize indigenous beliefs and surface cultures. It's called fetishizing. It calls instead for deconstructing settler-imposed systems that continue to oppress Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. Moves of settler innocence domesticate decolonization's demand to undo colonialism, eliminating its gendered and radicalized hierarchies and establishing indigenous sovereignty. The danger of the decolonizing metaphor is that it prevents us from actually doing the work. It recenters whiteness, extends innocence to the settler, and entertains a settler future rather than recentering indigenous future and sovereignty. So there are some ideas. Framing who decolonization work is about and for is an integral step in moving forward with effective decolonial action. And as a history professor, as a history teacher, not a professor yet, working on it, I have to do some dates. I mean, right, so you ready for the test afterwards? Oh, wait, there is no test. But assessment is ongoing. Indigenous communities are always watching, always looking, always seeing. Do your actions fit with your words? Do our actions match who we say we are? Assessment is ongoing. Did you know? I won't do this Jeopardy style or anything else because you probably don't. At what point in time did Native Americans, tribal people, become citizens of the United States? What? We were here before you guys were. What's the deal? Anyone care to offer a guess? Yes? 1970. 70? Oh, they did. They're citizens. They are. Keep trying. At least there's that. 1924. The Indian Citizenship Act. Guess what it didn't include? The right to vote. That wouldn't come until much later, 1965, as a matter of fact, the second Voting Rights Act, signed by President Johnson. So we have the freedom of religion, right? It says so right there, Constitution, good to go, unless you're tribal. So when you think that tribal folks were actually free to practice their religious faith, sing their songs, sit on their porches and sing their prayer songs? Any guesses on that one? It was President Carter that signed that one. 1978, American Indian Religious Freedom Act. supplemented in 1994, that allowed the Native American Church to practice how they wanted to, which for them included the use of peyote. 94. I mean, this isn't like ancient history. And from my perspective, there's nothing in the United States that's ancient history, 250 years, please. It wasn't until 1887, so we go a little further back, with the Dawes Act. Again, you're taking notes, right? Look these things up. That sought to allocate land to tribal people. What? We've been here. So as long as you were part of a tribe, federally recognized, they'd give you 160 acres worth of your own land. Woohoo, what a deal. 160 acres, as long as you can prove your citizenship to your tribe. What happened to the rest of the land? It was sold to the white folks. Well, that's all the Indians. Woohoo, we can raise some commerce, some money and sell it to the rest. So we've got that, we've got those other pieces. You want a really nice rabbit trail to follow? Look up residential boarding schools. Yeah. Which those were still in effect. Canada. 1998 was the last Canadian boarding school that was closed. 98. So this is an ongoing issue, honest history. How many of you had this stuff in your history classes? I know when I was teaching history, because even here, Trail of Tears, Indian Removal Act, you guys know about that one, right? Yeah, it's right here. Yep. Did you know there were several from all over the place? That the Lakota people were driven? There's a big statue of Standing Bear, one of the chiefs in Ponca City, Oklahoma, on his Trail of Tears, where he lost children. So it's there. What do we do? What have we done? Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Sadly, in my research, UUs have not been necessarily the best allies. Getting better. But there's a wonderful book that I did looked at called Benevolent Intentions by Frederick Mayer, Decolonizing the Religious Liberal Imperial Mind, an American Story. Whoa. And one of the stories I came up with that, it's as a then and now kind of situation, is that, did you know, I know you're going to hate that phrase from me from now on, that the minister to Hawaii, there were no ambassadors at that point in time when the royal house was in place in Hawaii. The minister to Hawaii was a Unitarian Universalist. Matter of fact, a Universalist minister. John Stevens. John Stevens. Any of you guys heard of that guy? Okay. Minister to Hawaii. He was complicit in the occupation of Hawaii. Matter of fact, called the Marines in. Fortunately now, the congregation in Hawaii, the UU congregation, is thriving, fully indigenously involved, writing curriculum, offering space for ceremonies, doing all of these things, doing the work, stepping up, letting their hearts and hands rule. It's a wonderful opportunity. Unitarian Universalist congregation in Sioux Falls, working with the Lakota people that are up there, right in the middle of the 9 tribes, teaching language classes, offering components, doing these other things. We were at Standing Rock in droves, UU ministers, and I know a lot of them that were there at in the Hunkpapa Lakota lands in North Dakota. Our new minister was there. So there's work to be done. It's doable. How do we do it? Do some research, figure out what it looks like. How do we decolonize here? What does that look like? Fix that land acknowledgement. Ooh. Okay. We have a lot of work to do. We have an amazing tool set to do it with. We have amazing people here to do it with. We have a community of individuals. Let's do the work. Honest history is what it is. Thank you.
We'll now have our postlude with Kurt and Willow. No. I would like to thank everyone who made this service possible, which includes everyone here and on Zoom. Thanks to Eric and Willow for sharing today's message. Thanks to Kurt and Willow for today's music. Thanks to Elena for her accompaniment. Thanks to Bill as AV host. Thanks to Jerry and Jan for greeting. And thanks to myself for facilitating. We'd like to take a quick moment before the benediction to ask people to please put the hymnals back on the chairs when you're leaving, and also take with you any cups, papers, and so forth that you may have brought in with you.
Yes. We're going to do part of this reading before we ask you to rise. It's a little long, and we know you've been in here for a minute, so we're going to wrap it up. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay. Every injury we may have named and yet still carry, those we haven't, can't, or dare not speak aloud, those we are not ready to make public, those still not recognized, accepted, or understood.
These are the wounds that seek replacement, not cancellation or denial, wounds that we will tend cautiously, applying the salve of understanding, forming scars that mark our history without disfiguring the future that we might share. Please rise as you are willing and able, and hold your hands out, or hold your hands together or palms out for the rest of this benediction.
May the strength of this time together help us to walk forward. May the wisdom of this experience help us know our path. May we have the courage to return as often as necessary until our way is clear. May we have the perseverance together to see it through.
May we cause it to be so.
Blessed be.
Go in peace with love and justice. Amen. Thank you.